Welcome to another wonderful episode of the Getting Defensive podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me today, as always, is Mr. Andrew Kalat.
Good evening, Jerry. And for those on video, you're in a weird place.
I am. It's so weird. I'm actually at my oldest son's house, which sounds so weird to say.
Does he know? Are you like breaking and entering, or?
I'm trying to extract all of the stuff that I've spent on him. Yeah.
That or are you just there to see the cats?
That is actually the case. Yes, he has two amazing cats, and I do love them.
Excellent. Well, anyway, nice to see you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So we have an awesome guest today, and I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce him.
Thank you. I want to welcome to the show Michael Taggart. Thanks for joining us. A little bit of background, quick bio for everybody. You're a security researcher in the healthcare space by day, which we've talked to some other folks in that space. Boy, God love you. That's a tough one. But he's more well-known, or you're more well-known, as a cybersecurity educator and communicator. Built up a considerable course library, including practical web app security and testing, and the Home Lab Almanac, a book about getting started with your own servers. You'll often find him posting on InfoSec Exchange, which somebody on this call may know something about, occasionally streaming on Twitch for all the kids out there, which, hey, good on you. And you run the Taggart Institute, which is a platform dedicated to providing high-quality, low-cost technical training to those who want to master their craft and transform their lives. And your latest course is How to Learn as an Adult and Detection Engineering in Sigma. So, frankly, I could probably use some of those. It gets a little harder as you get older. But
it definitely does.
Hey, welcome to the show. How is it? Did I miss anything important?
That was the best introduction I've ever had. Andrew, thank you so much. Good to be here with you and Jerry. Wow. Really excited.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So I'm interested to understand how you got your start in security.
Wow. So I fell into doing IT out of college, which I had a degree in English after I graduated, which, as we all know, is super lucrative. But I had a childhood growing up around a bunch of computers. My dad did stuff with Flight Safety International, so he was doing like early voiceovers actually for flight simulators. And so we always had components around the house. So if I wanted to put a computer together, it was like up to me to do it. And I did. So like I always had computers as a thing that I was good at. I was like that kid that fixed the teacher's computer in school. But I never wanted to make a career out of it because I was bad at math, hence the English degree.
Nice.
But I fell into teaching after college and I ended up being a technology educator. And I had this moment where I decided that was something I was really excited about, and I decided to pursue technology education. But in so doing, I don't know if you've had any experience with school-based technology or IT, but very often there's one person who does all of it, right? And that was me. I was that person. Everything from designing new network diagrams to running patch cables, writing software eventually, all of that stuff. So I built up all of this expertise in different areas of IT, but security was always the thing that I felt was super important and the hardest to access. And then round about 2018, saw just by happenstance on Twitter that Leslie Carhart had an extra ticket to go to HOPE, Hackers on Planet Earth in New York. And I messaged them and said, hey, I'm a teacher. I'd love to learn more about this. And they said, here you go. And that was it. I was hooked and I immediately decided to turn my career toward cybersecurity specifically. And then ended up at UCLA Health, but couldn't stop being a teacher. So during the pandemic, I ended up doing a lot of this live streaming and stuff and found that there was this community of folks who were doing cybersecurity work, learning in public that way, which was kind of exciting.
That's cool. Leslie is good people. We got to get her on the show, Jerry. Get on that.
I know. So I think she's in the middle of a transition at the moment. But yes, it's a good idea. It's a good idea. So in terms of educating people about security, what do you find is, I guess, the most challenging and the most rewarding aspects of that?
You know, it's interesting because I think I think we can distinguish the conversation a little bit, because there's like educating people about security, which cybersecurity awareness, that sort of thing, educating general users. And then there's the business of professional learning in the cybersecurity industry. And they're a little bit different, because the things that you have to know as a general user ideally are somewhat different than what you need to know as a professional in the space. Sure. And I think that for the general user, I think that there's been a little bit of a dearth of instructional design or even ed theory, thinking about how people really need to learn, especially with the limited resources that they have available. And when I say resources, I don't mean funding and I don't mean technology. One of the core things that we talk about actually in the new course is this really basic idea of the theory of margin. It's an ed theory term, so it sounds super complicated, but you already know this for sure. As a kid, your whole job is being in school, right? All of your energies can be put to learning. They're not, but they could be in theory. Mm-hmm. But as an adult, that's definitely not true, right? You have all of these other obligations. And if you want to learn a new skill, or if you want to do another additional thing on top of it, the only way to make that happen is in the gap between your like power and the load on the circuit, which is all of your obligations and responsibilities. And again, it's super obvious, but like you don't think about that when you say, oh, I got to go learn this new thing. You add that to your plate without thinking about what it actually means to try to accomplish that. And that's also true when we talk about user education, because they've got a job to do, right? And we're asking them to do this other thing on top of it and asking them to retain it and then change their behavior based on that immediately. That whole process is kind of, I won't say doomed to failure, but it's a very narrow avenue towards success if you want to hit it. And I think it's really easy to miss.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's one thing that I've often struggled with too, is trying to mentor teams, is I find people learn in different ways. And some are experiential, some are, I'm sure there's terms for this that I don't know, but like they like lectures and classes, where others want to learn on their own with books and examples and activities. And I sometimes feel like we, at least from the generic training I typically see for like cybersecurity awareness, we try to go very one size fits all, and it doesn't seem to always be super effective.
Well, totally. And part of that is because there's stuff that's cheap to produce, and then there's the stuff that's effective, and those are not the same thing. You talked about learning styles, right? I'm going to give you a cheat code for learning styles. It turns out that there's basically just one. If you talk to anybody about what their learning style is, they'll all say, oh, I learn best by doing. Everybody does. That's not a style. That's just how human beings work. The trick is people have different preferences for processing language, right? If you're thinking about how you consume information, language is the only game in town, right? That's all we got. And so how you process it, like it's literally which organs do it better for you, will change what you need to consume in order to prepare yourself for that experiential learning, to get hands-on, right? Like if I'm giving you instructions verbally, but you don't do so well processing people's speech, and then you try to go to do the things like, I don't actually know what I'm doing because I couldn't process that language. Now you're screwed. But if you have text in front of you and you're really good at processing visual language, you have that, then you can process it and then go do the thing. So that's kind of what we focus on in the new course too, is like identifying how you process language best so you can go do the thing. But getting back to your training part, like experiential learning, which is best for everybody, is almost never part of that awareness training that we do. We're clicking through videos, right? Except the experiential component that we do is punitive because it's the phishing simulation. That's the experience.
Yeah. And I could go off on a long rant about what I feel about those.
Me too.
But I'll save it because, we're on limited time.
I'm hoping the tide is slightly turning with that. I've seen a lot of research come out, and even the last year, from places like Google saying like, hey, these don't work. We now have we have longitudinal data to tell us that user behavior doesn't change, right? So let's try something different.
Yeah. It's one thing too, like Jerry and I were once at a conference in Columbia, which was cool, and humble brag, we got to go to Columbia, which was cool. But I put together a talk there that is still online somewhere, where I was trying to argue that people who are victims of phishing or social engineering, it's not a moral defect, it's not an intelligence defect, it's usually a motivational attack. It's a psychological attack of some type that's playing on that person's intrinsic motivations at that time. And we, as security folks, need to not let that be fatal to the company as best we can.
That's right.
And not expect like everybody to be flawless when we've got bad actors who know how to manipulate psychology very well. The very short version of that.
It's always struck me that just, and I may say this badly, but to me, it felt like, or feels like, a lot of the security profession approaches awareness training kind of like programming a firewall, defining the rules in a firewall. And the expectation is that those rules will consistently work every time, all the time. And one of the realities about the human condition is like our ability to detect something is going to be vastly different at 6 a.m. than it is at 11 a.m. and at 3 p.m. and at 12 a.m. And to some extent, I feel like look, security awareness is a big part of most all compliance regimes, whether it's SOC or ISO or like anything, it's an intrinsic part of it. But I really feel like it's to some extent become a cop-out for security, the IT and security infrastructure, saying, like, what, as Andy just pointed out, like, what's wrong with you? You clicked on the link. We told you not to click on the link, and here you are clicking on the link. And I have firsthand experience with, this was probably 10 years ago, but I was leading a security team at a very large company, and somebody fell for a phishing attack, and it caused some damage in the scheme of things. But like the very, very senior leadership said, well, like, did this person not take the training? The answer was yes. Well, then we need to fire them. They clearly didn't follow the training. And I think that's just the wrong way.
Oh, yeah.
The wrong way of thinking about it. Like, because now you're like, it's, what kind of precedent does that set?
Jerry,
yeah.
Was this person you?
Yeah. This unnamed employee.
It's okay.
Asking for a friend.
Sorry, Michael.
No. You got to ask the hard-hitting questions. Coming from K-12 education, I feel like I have a slight advantage in this because one of the things that you have to lead with in that field is empathy at all times. For, by the way, not just students who are always your primary focus, but also for teachers. Teachers, generally speaking, are not technically super savvy, right? And so if you're the technical provider, you have to make sure that things work so that they can do what they need to do. And this is true in every business, right? The technology is a means, not an end. And it's really the idea that they have to be a certain level of technically sophisticated in order to succeed. And also there's a trap if they're not is problematic. And then how do they feel afterward? That how do they feel afterward is like really important. And it's also important on the training side. One of the things that in our incident response team, we talk a lot about is how the user feels before, during, and after an engagement with us, right? So like if they did click on a phishing link or they downloaded some malware, whatever it is, and they have taken the proactive step to contact us, we are praiseful about that. We are making sure that say, hey, you did the right thing. This is great. Now we're partners in this. And we give them things that they can do. They have to feel empowered, right, to move forward. It's not punitive. Like, how could you do this? It's not about that. And by the way, if that one malware sample or that one identity compromise can take us out, like that's on us. That's not on the user.
Exactly.
Right?
Agreed.
So like we're in that, and then say, okay, now next time, here are some things that we can give you so that you are more protected, right? Were you using a password manager before? No. Here's how you get that started. Were you using MFA everywhere? No, here's how in your personal life, and like give them something so that they feel empowered and more willing to contact us again. Because if you leave the engagement with the user feeling what we used to call a shame response, right? There's a negative affect to the engagement. You're never going to hear from them again, and you've lost that connection. And it's like a sensor going down in the environment. You're never going to hear from that endpoint again. You don't know what its status is. And that's a real problem. The user base has to feel comfortable to contact the security team or whoever they're supposed to contact, because they are your first line of defense. But that's a relational, that's not a technical connection. It's a human relational connection.
Which IT people and security people are known for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Very famously.
Very accommodating and understanding, yes.
No, it's a real problem. Like, I mean, I see it in some of my best guys. They get frustrated easily with users who don't have the level of skills that they have. And I try to explain, look, they have a different job they're paid for. They're paid for processing invoices. And they're trying to do that as best they can. They're not paid to look at that PDF and understand if it's got malware embedded in it and what email it came from. You're paid for that. Right. You don't know how to do their job. Like, they're not dumb. They just have a different skill set. But it's a constant challenge I see with security folks in particular that I think you hit it on the head with the empathy thing. I think we struggle a lot.
And there's also some introspection worthwhile for the operators too, because who are you really mad at? It's not the users, it's the bad guys. You are feeling violated because your network is getting compromised, right? It's the criminals that deserve your ire, not the user. And one of the things that when I have a lot of students who come through the Taggart Institute and they start wanting to be pen testers. They all do. They all start wanting to be red teamers. Yeah. And then over time, they'll be like, well, but defense is like a place where you can like build something in a place and, watch it grow, which is, I think, of value. And one of the reasons I like being a blue teamer myself, although the offensive skills have a lot of value there. But in that environment, one of the realities you have to live with is you lose little battles, even if you win the war. Right? Every day, a bad guy gets a foot in the door, right? And you have to get comfortable with that idea that you're, to some degree, working at a disadvantage as a defender. And just like you got to accept that and not get angry at the situation, the user, or your team members about it. Like, that's just the nature of the game, and you've decided to play it.
It's tough to prove the breaches you stopped.
Exactly. Yeah.
For your red teaming course, is like 80% about report writing? Because that's how the job really is.
So we have like 2 offensive courses, right? The practical web app security and testing course, which I literally wrote to teach the rest of my actual team how to do web app testing in a way. Nice. And yes, there's an entire section at the end about reporting specifically and how to have the meeting with the web app test. Because when you're with a web app, it's like, you're going to meet maybe with the developers, maybe with the administrators, maybe with the executives. And those are all different audiences and you need to talk to them differently, right? Web apps in particular, because they're part of app security, are like one of the hardest parts that I've also, my pen tester friends are like, I hate doing web apps. Give me a Windows network to go attack. I'm like, I love web apps. I don't want to deal with Kerberos. But that is a particular conversation, also a human problem to have. And then one of the things we have, my friend Matt Kiley, who's over at Huntress now, who goes by Husky Hacks, he put together this amazing course called Responsible Red Teaming, which we host. Sure. And it's not about like exploit dev. It's not about how to operate a C2, although you do both of those things in the course. It's about how to perform the role of a red team operator ethically, right? How do you make sure that all of the information you're capturing from a customer is stored securely, for example? If you encounter a previously compromised device during your engagement, how do you handle that? That's never happened, right? It's like, was that the CISA report that just came out that their red team was like, we found a web shell from a previous attack? Yeah. And then how do you, like, if you come up against something that is in scope but still sensitive, like, how do you handle that? Are you using restraint during the engagement? All of those things are part of it. And we even go into, sorry for the dorkery here, but we go into some of the moral philosophy that backs the theory, talking about the ethics of care, right? You are caring for this network and what are your obligations because you're in that role. Nobody, lots of people sign up for it because it's a red team course. 8% of people complete it because then they discover that it's not about popping shells and then they quit. But for the 8% that do complete it, I think that they come away with a better understanding of the reality of being a successful and effective red team operator.
And as somebody who hires those guys, that's stuff I really actually do care a lot about.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's really cool.
I have to say, I have not heard of a course like that before. So that is, that, and I've hired a lot of red teamers in my time. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, Matt did a great job on that course. It culminates in sort of a choose your own adventure where you are clicking your way through performing a red team engagement, and there are multiple endings depending on what you choose, up to including you getting arrested, I think one of them happens to be. So choose wisely.
We'll have to throw a link for that in the show because that's really cool, in the show notes because that's really cool.
Very interesting. So one thing at the opening, you mentioned having an English degree. And I will tell you, I've worked with technology people for a long time, for a very long time, including in senior management roles. And I suspect Andy has a similar thing. I think one of the common problem areas that people have is with communicating. And I know Andy made the joke about report writing, but frankly, that is a problem. Like, I think that is one of the challenges that we as an industry have is effective communication.
Well, not anymore, right? ChatGPT is going to solve that for us, right? You're just going to send your findings CSV to ChatGPT and then you're set.
That's true. That's true. You got the little, on your iPhone now, you got the little AI button, right?
Yep. To be clear, I am like a vehement anti-LLM radical. I want to disinvent the technology. But yeah, it is a problem. And writing skills, communication skills are something that I think personally you should hire for. It's not always possible, but whenever possible during an interview process, if you can get something like a writing sample or just a way to have an open-ended chunk of thought translated into language from the candidate, it helps you understand so much about their thought process, how they're going to communicate, how they're going to think about other people, all of that. Super, super valuable artifact. And in fact, it's so valuable that in our courses, we don't do multiple choice tests. For every one of our courses, we have these kind of interstitial things we call checks for understanding, where you're asked to write a response to a question that isn't like a single answer. You have to think carefully about it. And like, we're not grading these because I don't care if you pass or fail. You have to care if you pass or fail as a student, right? It's for you to teach yourself. And at the very end, a lot of the time what we have is, we always have this thing called an exhibition of mastery, but those exhibitions often are going to have a lot of writing involved because you have to talk about what you did and explain it. Like for pen testers or anybody who does like Hack the Box or CTF stuff, which is like half of the community that I run because they're kids, right? They're starting and they're doing Hack the Box stuff. They always talk about like, oh, well, I shouldn't read the walkthrough if I can't get it. I should try harder. No, read the walkthrough, because if you don't know what questions to ask, that's the answer. Once you read the walkthrough, try to do the exercise without reading it. But then if you can explain why the exploits worked or whatever, if you can explain it in writing, you have now completed the challenge for real, not just captured the flag. So that writing as evidence of learning is like a core concept that we try to imbue in all of the stuff that we do.
And have you considered having an AI judge those writing samples for you?
Boy, Teachable really wants me to pay for that feature. So I've considered it and dismissed it out of hand.
That's fair. That was a badly timed joke.
I think he was poking to poke.
Oh, for sure.
So to change topics a little bit, tell us about the Home Lab Almanac.
Oh my God. So I didn't expect to write a book about server administration or home labs or anything, but certainly not while I was like holding a newborn. But what ended up happening is all of the stuff that I was doing for the Taggart Institute and doing streaming required its own hardware. I'm sure Jerry knows nothing about that. And so I ended up picking up a server and just kind of learning not just how to run your own hypervisor and all that stuff. I've been a Linux admin for a million years, and I had that background. But the automation with things like Ansible, Terraform, Packer for templating, all of that stuff, and then how to usefully and quickly bring up experimental environments for things like malware analysis. There were some that did it. There's like Detection Lab, which is a great old, and there's a newer one called Ludus, but they all are a little auto-magical, right? They kind of have a one button push and then you're off to the races. And that's not what I wanted. I wanted just enough automation so that it was fast, but also you actually learned how this stuff worked as you went through it. So like you learned how to do DevOps correctly. Like one of the things that the lab that we deploy has as kind of a claim to fame for me is there are no clear text secrets anywhere in the environment. Not even in environment variables. Everything is handled by a secrets vault, and all of the DevOps tools hook into the secrets vault. This is even for your home lab, so that it retrieves those secrets at deploy time, and you never have to worry about those clear text secrets just living somewhere.
That's awesome.
That would save me so many headaches. You have no idea.
Right? So and it's possible. You can do it. It just takes a little bit more config and you can make it happen. So once I had a working recipe for this, I was like, I can write sentences. So I decided to just put this together, and it ended up being a book length. And so, yeah, people seem to enjoy it. That's the one thing we make people pay for. It's $20, but it's $20 of, we go through not just the software side of it, but we even talk about how much power do you require for the lab that you want to deploy? How do you understand how many vCPUs that machine is actually going to give you? How do you think about memory requirements? How do you have the conversation with your partner about where this is going to live in the house?
It's important. It is important. Believe me. It's
If you're introducing a small jet engine into the house, it may be worth a conversation. So all of that through, how to go further with the lab. And yeah, it's been really effective. It's been fun to maintain. One of the cool things is that even though it's a book, because if you buy it through us, you get the PDF, the EPUB, and a local HTML searchable static site of the book. As there have been changes to the tools, I've been able to update the book and make sure that that's available to everybody who's already purchased it. They can just re-download the new version. So we try to keep it as updated as possible. And that's not easy because Terraform likes to break stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine just the updates is probably a full-time gig just to know what's changed and how that might impact flow through a lab or whatever.
Every time Proxmox has a new version, I just sort of roll my eyes all right, here we go. What's going to break this time?
So one thing that you've mentioned a couple times is everything that you seem to be doing is very low cost or very reasonably costed, which is intriguing to me for a couple reasons, right? When my guys come to me hey, we want training, we want to go to SANS training. I'm like, I can't mortgage my house to send you to training. But people seem to value or there's this psychological precept of it must be more valuable because it's more expensive, which I challenge. I don't know that that's truly true there. So I was curious about, there's obviously a lot of demand here and probably a lot of profit you could make, but what motivates you to keep the prices low, and how do you achieve that and still do all this great stuff? And how do you think about that, I guess, is the question.
It's so funny. I had that when I was just starting out, I had that same conversation with Brian Brake. Yeah. I don't know if you guys know Brian. Mm-hmm. He's another podcaster, streamer. Yeah. So Brian and I were hanging out, and he said, no one's going to value the stuff if you give it away for free. And I was like, maybe, but I suspect that is a very American concept. I think that the United States puts dollar value on things in ways that not the rest of the world does. And in fact, the reality of my audience is that it's global. And a lot of kids in Pakistan cannot afford $30 for a course, to say nothing of a SANS price tag, right? Even with assistance. That's a big ask. Mm-hmm. And this knowledge shouldn't be gated behind ridiculous price tags. Because there's the cybersecurity industry, but there's also just knowledge about how technology works. And those are two different things. And I'm after the second thing, right? So when I started doing all this, I was already an open source nerd. I already had this sort of ethos behind me. And look, the reality is that I have the privilege of a day job with my employer that pays well enough that I don't have to use this as an income source. We do okay, but I don't have to rely on it primarily. And because I don't, I have the opportunity to produce this and build a community around something other than just paying for the material directly. And that's the reason, right? And I think that if you are in a position of privilege and you have the capacity to share, I don't know if there's an obligation, but I feel an obligation to do so. And so I have to do this. And then in terms of just keeping it affordable, it's a trick. You want to have the free option, and then you trust in the generosity and the kindness of people that they will contribute when they can. Mostly that's been true. I'm sure more people I know for sure that more people get the courses for free than they could afford to maybe kick something over, but that's okay. Maybe they'll do that next time. So that's just, it's a function of the privilege that I have and what I believe in. And I do believe that the courses are valued and the material is valued, even though it's being given away for free because of the way that people talk about it.
That's great.
So My next question was about your day job, and I don't want to go too deep, but I'm interested in understanding your bio says that you're a security researcher in the healthcare space.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, what is involved in that?
It changes every day. I'm very lucky to be where I am at UCLA Health. We invest significantly in cybersecurity, but also we have a pretty forward-thinking way of imagining cybersecurity. It's not just about compliance checkboxes. We really make sure that it's not about that. Instead, we're thinking about what's next, and we think a lot about the adversary. We have real adversaries, right? Whether they're nation states or whether they're cybercrime groups that we know are targeting healthcare. And that idea of the adversary who will impact patient care is something that we talk about literally every day. We threat model around it. We have weekly threat briefings around it. And a lot of my job is that kind of research. It's not necessarily like finding exploits in medical devices, although I try to poke at them whenever I can. It's much more a formalized version of what I kind of do on social media all the time. It's about synthesizing information, understanding how it impacts us, communicating it to our constituents, right? Security for us is a service that we provide. We are in service of the administrators and the developers who produce the product, which is for a healthcare organization, that's, your medical devices, right? But it's also going to be the EHR, EMR systems that allow you as a patient to log in and look at your chart, look at your prescriptions, get refills, things like that. That is the product that we deliver. And so we have to make sure that plus end patient care, of course, is maintained. We are of service to the operators who do so. The security is a service to that. They don't work for us, we work for them. So what we provide has to be useful to them. That's a lot of what it is. And it's thinking about when there's a new 0 day, talking about it realistically, right? It's not just, oh my God, patch now. Sometimes you can't.
Right.
Right? Sometimes it's like, hey, well, like if there's a Cisco 0 day or something like that. It's like, well, we can't shut the switch down because it's operating bedside devices. So what do you want to do? Right? Okay, you win. There's a cool, I don't know if either of you have worked in healthcare, but there's a cool reality about this. There's this protocol called HL7, which is like the language that all the medical devices talk. And it's been around for decades. And one of the things that I was amazed to learn about HL7 when I learned about it is that there's literally no concept of authentication in it. No such thing. And the reason is that they're like, the idea was, what really are we talking about here? If I need to create an order for a medication to save a patient's life, the username and password that I am using to do so does not matter, right? That is another level of concern. That is way different than where I'm at. Later APIs have security, but that difference of value sets in healthcare is something that we have to be aware of. It doesn't work the same way as other industries. And also, I think that we have to think about it a little bit more like in industry or OT in terms of like the total cost of ownership and the length of time that devices exist. Like you buy an X-ray, that's a 5-figure purchase. It's going to be around for a couple of decades, right? And then what's the machine that it was based on? How much can it be updated? How does it get patched? All of those things kind of lead into it. And so all of that is part of the research that I do, looking at what's out there, how it affects us, but then also sometimes having the ability to build solutions that make sense for us, whether that be threat hunting queries, right? Detection engineering, that's part of the job, whether that be sometimes exploit development to do proof of concepts, that is part of the job. What I'm working on right now is we've identified a gap in workflows for a lot of environments where when we have an incident response, very often we're then collecting things like Windows event logs. I don't know if you've ever used Windows Event Viewer, but it sucks real bad.
Yep.
So this is like a tooling problem, right? The data is there, but parsing it is slow. It takes a long time. There are tools that exist like Velociraptor that makes it a little bit faster, but then Velociraptor, you have to use like a special query language to parse it. So there's like this tooling gap. And then for any analyst who happens to run across this problem and they want to analyze logs, what do? There are some tools, but they're just kind of not there. So what I'm being paid to do right now is build a new tool. We're calling it Venture, and it's a cross-platform GUI application that will take EVTX files, the Windows event logs, parse them, and give you an easy way to sort, filter, search, and export and flag the log events of interest so that you can then investigate them more deeply, quickly, rather than using something else that takes a longer time, right? Because we're racing the adversary, right? Even if we contain the machine or whatever else, like we're on the clock for figuring out what they were trying to do and getting those IOCs out so that we can look at broader view of the environment to see what else may have been impacted that way. So anything we can do to increase the analysis speed, I think, is of value. So that's the kind of stuff that they give me the latitude to do.
It's pretty
Very cool.
Yeah.
So in our waning moments, I apologize, I'm going to have to bug out fairly soon. I'm curious if you have any advice, either career wise, security wise, it's up to you for our listeners.
Sure. So I actually just wrote a blog post that I was jokingly calling your 2025 cybersecurity jobs guide. But basically, it's like, here's the reality. It's rough out there, man. People are not hired. First of all, most of the jobs, or about half maybe of the jobs that you see posted, are not real. They are ghost jobs. So the market isn't as vacant as you might think. The numbers that the White House are pushing about, what is it, like 357,000 jobs in the United States, 457,000 in the United States, and 3 million globally in cybersecurity, they're just not accurate. Being companies selling certifications made those numbers up.
Sure.
And CISA just ran with it. So that's part one. So you got to do something. It's not like you're going to trip and fall into a tier 1 SOC analyst job. That's not going to happen. My recommendation to folks who are interested in getting into cybersecurity, starting from non-IT fields, start with systems administration. Learn how to stand up a Windows server, a Windows domain controller. Learn how to stand up a Linux server, set up a web server, run WordPress, whatever it is. Learn how it actually works. Build the thing, and then figure out how it gets attacked, and then protect against it, and now you're off to the races. But security, as I said, is in service of operations. And I strongly believe that beginning your journey in operations, including help desk, right? Learning where the bodies are buried in help desk is such a leg up in the environment. Don't look down on those jobs. They're super valuable. Start there. Even if you want to be a pen tester, you will have such an easier time pivoting through an environment if you know how system administrators actually build networks. It's definitely the place to start. And meanwhile, while the cybersecurity jobs market is a little bit more challenging, you have a much broader possibility of jobs that you can apply to, because you don't just have the Sec Plus, right? You don't just have the OSCP. You have experience doing other things. And those other things can be in demand as well.
No, that's great. One thing I was curious about is, one thing we've never really explored much in the show is this concept of these ghost jobs that a lot of people are running into. Expand on that a bit. Like, what do you think's going on there?
So some of the research that I read for the article suggested that, at least in the UK, up to 46% of cybersecurity jobs may be fake. And that's yeah. And I think that's just because there's no cost to the employers of leaving the position open and keeping the resume mill churning, right? And then when they do have a position, they have like the highest possibility of getting a hit because they have this constantly churning flow of resumes. I think that's part of it. I also think that it's like a P.T. Barnum trick, it's like leave them wanting more. Everybody is creating this idea that there is supply to meet the demand, and it keeps the folks on LinkedIn hungry and applying and paying for certifications. Like it's just the machine doing the machine's thing, right? That is the cybersecurity industry, getting kids to pay for certs that they don't need, or maybe they do need, and then running through the application process 100 times, getting more certs because now they didn't get picked up in the first round. Like all of that is part of it. And the ghost jobs just make that easier because it's like, well, I got to apply to these 100 jobs and now that didn't work. So what do I have to do differently? And in fact, you actually applied to like 6 jobs.
I know from firsthand experience that another variant on it, that issue is, especially in lean times, like we want to take care of internal people. And so, we want to hire, like you mentioned help desk, right? Like I want to hire a SOC analyst, but I know who I want to hire in the help desk, right? But I have to open that position. Like it's a corporate policy. It's perceived as a legal requirement, whatever, I have to open up and post publicly a job for that, even though my intention...
Every government institution has that problem, right? Yeah.
Yeah. My intention is to hire Sally over in the help desk, but I have to open up, a job. And I think that happens a fair amount. I don't think it in any way explains it. By the way, there was, Andy and I talked about this on a podcast, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, about the numbers. And one of the epiphanies we had was that 3 million number comes from a survey of security people saying, how many security roles do you need to operate effectively? And that was not how many open headcount do you have,
right.
how many people can't you find? It was, how many people do you need in order to run your security program effectively? That's how they got to the 3 million number. And it's gotten legs and is completely ridiculous.
And what a crazy source. What a good way of getting an accurate estimation of demand. And it's everywhere,
so
too. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Completely off the wall question before we wrap up here, because I know Jerry's got to go. So you said your dad was involved with Flight Safety International. Did he take you to get in some of the sims and play around?
Yes, he did, actually.
Nice.
I remember we went over to Wilmington, and I did some hours in, I don't think it was a Learjet. I think it was like an Israeli private jet. We definitely broke some rules. We flew under bridges and stuff like that. That was a lot of fun.
It's what you do in the sim.
Yeah.
And for those listening, if you ever see those big, look like motion activated things up on hydraulic stilts, that's one of the things flight safety does, is they have these big bays where they perfectly replicate a cockpit of a given aircraft, and you can use it for training, and it's very cool. And so I'm very jealous.
No, I mean, that was not the sims that we were doing, the take-home, or he was doing the take-home ones. It was this was in the very early days of touch screens, when it was an IR net that you put over the monitor, right?
Oh, wow.
And it would be adjust to the trim wheel now, right? And then you'd have to use your thumb to hit the trim wheel.
All right. So my apologies, but I'm going to have to run. So where can people find out more about you?
Well, I have my social media stuff, which is on your server, Jerry, infosec.exchange/MT Taggart. And then I do have a Blue Sky account as well. It's the same stuff, taggart-tech.com. That's my blog. But the place that I want to send folks, most importantly, is the taggartinstitute.org. That's where all of our free or pay-what-you-wish courses are. That's how you get into the community. And if you're interested in what we have, I hope you enjoy it.
Oh, thank you very much. This was great.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And I gotta say, Taggart Institute sounds super cool. It sounds like you do spooky, black ops that we're not supposed to know about.
It sounds like a 1980s, private investigator TV show.
I was gonna say, we absolutely have a talking car, for sure.
That's all you should.
Yeah, voiced by Jeff Daniels, William Daniels.
Anyway, thank you again.
Awesome.
It was great talking to you again, and we'll hopefully we can connect again on the show later.
For sure. My pleasure, guys.
Yeah. And thanks everybody for listening. If you like the show, tell a friend. It's a new show for us. Different feeds. We're trying to get off the ground. Trying to make sure it's useful to you guys. So give us feedback. We love feedback. You can find it at gettingdefensive.com. You can find it on YouTube. I'm on infosec.exchange and X at Lerg, L-E-R-G. Jerry at infosec.exchange, which he runs and owns and has a massive amount of footprint in the Fediverse because he's becoming the Fediverse overlord.
That's
Don't
right.
tell anyone.
One site at a time.
Who wants that job?
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.